that man loves me so much. And, look what we built. We've built a beautiful life and we have two healthy, beautiful children.
What if everything the world believed about Meghan Markle's pregnancies was a lie, fabricated, staged, and now finally exposed? Tonight, a former royal aide breaks their silence, unleashing evidence that could shatter the very foundation of the Sussex family. Signed surrogate contracts, hidden recordings, and forged documents now point to a stunning claim. Meghan never gave birth to Archie or Lilibet. Federal charges have been filed. She's been arrested, and the palace is scrambling to contain the fallout. In this urgent report, we break down the timeline, the cover-up, and what this means for the future of the royal line. This isn't speculation. This is a scandal backed by hard proof, and it's only just beginning. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The illusion shattered not with a photograph or a press release, but with a whisper. A leak passed through encrypted channels, buried among thousands of files, and delivered to a journalist already conditioned to spot royal inconsistencies. It came with documents, voice recordings, and something far more damning: motive. For years, the world celebrated the birth of Archie Harrison and Lilibet Diana as the dawn of a new, modern era for the British royal family. But according to new revelations, those births may have never happened in the way we were told. And the woman at the center of the controversy, Meghan Markle, is now facing the most explosive accusations of her life. At the heart of the unfolding scandal is a former aide. This person, whose identity remains protected under whistleblower law, has come forward with what they describe as undeniable evidence that Meghan did not physically give birth to either of her children. The claim: both pregnancies were staged using prosthetics, fabricated medical documentation, and surrogate arrangements concealed from public and royal record. The fallout: Meghan is now reportedly under criminal investigation, charged with identity fraud, false documentation, and conspiracy to defraud both the public and government institutions. For those who have long questioned the peculiarities surrounding Meghan's pregnancies, the inconsistencies in her bump size, her vanishing postnatal belly, her lack of confirmed hospital records, this is more than vindication. It is confirmation. And for her defenders, it is an earthquake, shaking the foundations of a carefully constructed image, raising questions not just about Meghan, but about the lengths powerful institutions will go to maintain a fairy tale. The story begins with the aide, a former royal household employee who served in a hybrid role, part logistical coordinator, part press liaison, during the height of Meghan and Harry's tenure as senior royals. According to the initial whistleblower dossier, the aide began noticing irregular patterns around Meghan's first pregnancy in 2018. Medical appointments were scheduled privately and later canceled without explanation. Meghan insisted on handling much of the documentation herself. Royal physicians were kept at a distance. Security teams were reassigned without clear instruction. But it was a single folder, left on a secure office desk, and then hastily retrieved, that first triggered suspicion. Inside were scanned pages of what appeared to be a third-party surrogacy agreement. The names were redacted, but the dates aligned precisely with the timeline of Meghan's pregnancy with Archie. The file had been accessed from an external server, not from within the palace network. And most troubling of all, it contained a voice memo labeled Consent Confirmation, MM. The aide made a copy. Months passed. Archie was born, or so the world was told. No medical team stepped forward to confirm. No photo emerged of Meghan leaving the hospital with the child. Unlike every previous royal birth, no signature from the Queen's official obstetrician was ever released to the press. In its place was a tightly scripted announcement, a few carefully chosen images, and a brief media appearance that raised more questions than it answered. The world saw Meghan smiling. But the aide, holding that digital copy, saw something else, a potential lie so massive, so reckless, it could collapse the credibility of one of the most iconic institutions on Earth. At first, they said nothing. Fear outweighed duty. But when the same patterns repeated during Meghan's second pregnancy in 2020, with even more privacy, even fewer public appearances, and zero medical transparency, they began collecting everything. Email threads, calendar inconsistencies, messages from Meghan's personal staff about handling legal redundancies and removing hospital access from the rota. And then came the audio files. In one of them, Meghan's voice allegedly discusses surrogate selection and NDAs. We'll need her to sign the revised clause. "I don't want any chance this comes back later," she says. In another, she allegedly argues with a staffer over naming rights and postnatal optics. It needs to look real. The photos, the entrance, it all has to match the public line. We can't slip on this. These recordings, now in the hands of investigative authorities, have become the backbone of a sweeping inquiry, one that spans multiple jurisdictions and threatens to entangle members of both the Sussex household and external facilitators. The charges? Identity fraud, by allegedly using someone else's biological and birth data to file official records. False documentation for filing UK and US birth certificates under the pretense of natural childbirth. And most damning, conspiracy to mislead the public and government institutions by accepting royal privileges, taxpayer-funded security, and international legal protections under false pretenses. The implications are staggering. For the monarchy, it calls into question every announcement and ceremony involving Archie and Lilibet. Were their royal baptisms legally valid? Were their titles granted based on fraudulent information? And for Prince Harry, it raises a painful question. Did he know? Was he a participant in this deception, or a victim of it? Sarah Ferguson, who has remained largely silent during the Sussex era, reportedly told a close friend upon hearing the whistleblower's claims, "This will tear the house down." She may be right. Because what's at stake here isn't just royal decorum, it's public trust. The institution of monarchy thrives not on power, but on illusion, on the belief that what we see is real, that lineage is sacred, that birth, blood, and tradition still mean something. If that illusion dies, so does the entire premise of monarchy. Already, the backlash has begun. On social media, hashtags like #MeghanFraud and #FakeRoyalBumps have surged to the top of trending charts. Legal experts are weighing in on whether the children's titles can be revoked. Mental health advocates are warning against mob mentality, while palace insiders leak stories of deep internal panic. The Sussex team has gone into digital lockdown. No tweets, no statements, no denials. Just silence, a silence that grows heavier with every passing hour. In the middle of it all sits the whistleblower, now under legal protection, cooperating fully with federal investigators and Royal Legal Counsel. They claim they have more to release: signed contracts, hospital correspondence, and a paper trail that connects Meghan's private legal team with multiple surrogate facilitators in Canada, the US, and a third country that has not yet been identified. The scandal is moving quickly. Arrest reports are being filed. Legal teams are mobilizing. And behind palace gates, a new storm brews, one that may not be weathered so easily this time. This video will take you through every layer of that storm, from the first suspicious folder to the global legal ramifications, from palace complicity to digital deception, from fake bellies to real consequences. Because if the evidence holds, and if these allegations are proven in court, then Meghan Markle hasn't just shaken the monarchy. She may have committed one of the most audacious acts of deception in royal history. And for a family whose very survival depends on legitimacy, there may be no coming back from this. It began with a job, a royal appointment that came with more restrictions than freedom, more protocol than purpose. The person now known only as the whistleblower never sought the spotlight. They were hired to serve quietly, to manage internal logistics, to protect royal image from the inside. But what they stumbled upon would ultimately destroy their loyalty, fracture their silence, and unleash a truth powerful enough to pull down the curtain on the monarchy's most carefully guarded deception. When they first entered Meghan and Harry's orbit in 2018, the whistleblower described the environment as unusually insulated. Unlike prior royal households, where staff were held at arm's length but kept informed, this one was barricaded by secrecy. Schedules were delivered at the last minute. Orders were relayed through intermediaries. Medical and personal matters were siloed so tightly that even those tasked with organizing transportation or security found themselves constantly shut out. According to early accounts, the first signs of irregularity emerged when preparations for Meghan's pregnancy with Archie began. Normally, a pregnancy within the royal family triggers a cascade of protocol, official medical documentation, security coordination for hospital visits, background checks on all attending staff, and precise coordination with press outlets to manage the public narrative. But in Meghan's case, the whistleblower quickly noticed deviations. First, there was no listed obstetrician affiliated with the Queen's medical team. Meghan had reportedly declined the palace's preferred doctor, a decision that raised eyebrows but was justified under the premise of modern independence. Then came the appointment schedules. Weeks would pass with no record of visits to any of London's maternity clinics known to be used by the royals. Private clinics were speculated, but nothing could be confirmed. The first tangible red flag, the whistleblower says, arrived as an accidental printout, left unshredded in the Aide's shared workstation. It appeared to be an email chain between Meghan's private assistant and a legal representative in California. The subject, contract finalization, surrogate timeline adjustment. At first, the whistleblower assumed it had nothing to do with the Duchess. It was vague, with no names mentioned. But the signature line, redacted and the copy retained, matched an email address previously used to coordinate Meghan's pre-engagement legal filings. Confused, concerned, and bound by confidentiality, the whistleblower took the file to a supervisor. They were told, in polite but unmistakable terms, to leave that where it is. That day, their access to the scheduling server was quietly reduced. Several of their responsibilities were reassigned. They began to understand something most palace staff learned too late. Some doors remain closed because what's behind them is not meant to be seen. The second pregnancy followed a similar pattern. But this time, the security around Meghan's behavior was even tighter. Public appearances were limited. Questions were discouraged. The pregnancy, announced through a staged photo of Meghan lying barefoot in a garden, came without formal medical confirmation. It wasn't unusual for royal families to control press access, but it was highly unusual to eliminate it entirely. During this period, the whistleblower became more proactive. If the first pregnancy was an anomaly, the second appeared outright orchestrated. They began collecting internal communications, archiving travel logs, monitoring the palace's IT system, where temporary folders, unprotected by encryption, would often hold version drafts of press statements. One such file, titled Family of Four Statement, Comms Draft, included a note that read, "Ensure birth is used, not surrogate, finalize with legal." That note stayed burned in the whistleblower's mind. Still, they said nothing. What could they prove? What court would believe an aide over a duchess? And who, exactly, could they report this to when the institution they served was the very one hiding the truth? The moment that changed everything came in the form of audio. One late evening, while organizing archival folders from an external drive used by Meghan's former PR firm, the whistleblower discovered a mislabeled folder titled Audio Brief, Surrogacy Final. Inside were 5 files. In one, Meghan's voice, unmistakable and clear, is allegedly heard discussing delivery logistics. She's agreed to the full silence clause. "I just want the timing tight. We'll announce it after the doctor signs off. But I need to see the hospital's template." Another recording captured what the whistleblower described as a tense discussion over legal exposure. "If someone finds out before we do this right, I'm screwed," Meghan allegedly said. "We can't leave a single file behind." That night, the whistleblower made a decision. They copied the folder and uploaded it to a secure cloud server under a newly created encrypted account. Then they waited. Days turned into weeks. But when Lilibet was born, with no hospital visit, no medical team, and no photograph showing Meghan in a postpartum condition, the aide knew it had gone too far. They drafted a letter, not to the palace, not to the press, but to a legal watchdog organization based in Canada known for protecting whistleblowers who expose elite corruption. Within 72 hours, they received a response. Confidentiality was guaranteed. An attorney was assigned, and a plan was formed. Over the next several months, the whistleblower provided all stored materials, emails, recordings, timestamped files, and internal memos. Everything was verified. Statements were corroborated with third-party forensic analysts. The legal team conducted background research into the alleged surrogates, identifying at least 2 women who, while legally bound to silence, were willing to confirm their role anonymously under protective orders. One of them claimed she had carried Meghan's child but was never allowed to meet the Duchess in person. All communication came through intermediaries. Payment was funneled through a trust. And the birth certificate, she said, listed Meghan as the biological mother despite her not being present at the delivery. The identity fraud allegations began to crystallize. Once enough material was gathered, the legal team made contact with U.S. authorities. The case, while royal in implication, was rooted in American soil, financial transfers, legal documents, and digital communications originating from California. Federal prosecutors reviewed the material for weeks before assigning a quiet team to prepare for inquiry. The whistleblower was brought in again, this time under oath. The goal was simple: verify whether Meghan had committed any federal crimes by misrepresenting herself on birth documentation, using surrogacy agreements while claiming personal delivery, and benefiting financially and reputationally from the lie. As the investigation expanded, the British government was informed through diplomatic channels. UK officials expressed concern, but no resistance. What mattered to them was shielding the monarchy. But as the evidence grew, it became clear this couldn't be contained any longer. The whistleblower's silence, once seen as a condition of loyalty, became a liability too dangerous to continue. The emotional toll mounted. They had nightmares, panic attacks, moments of deep regret. But every time they considered walking away, they remembered the phrase Meghan allegedly repeated in one of the recordings: "Once it's out there, no one will question it. They'll believe it because it's me." That level of confidence, some would say arrogance, was precisely what pushed the whistleblower to go public. Today, they live under protection. Their identity is sealed, but their actions have already transformed royal history. They are not out for vengeance. They do not seek money. They do not hate Meghan Markle. What they want is truth, because they believe the public, the press, and above all, the monarchy, deserve to operate in a world where facts cannot be scripted and babies cannot be conjured for PR. This chapter of the story is not about outrage. It's about one person who saw too much, who carried it too long, and who decided that truth mattered more than silence. What comes next, courtrooms, trials, political fallout, is still unfolding. But none of it would have been possible without the single decision made by a royal aide who refused to ignore the sound of a lie echoing through a locked palace door. For weeks, investigators pored over the contents of a single USB drive. A small, inconspicuous object that had the potential to unravel one of the most elaborate cover-ups the royal household had ever known. It wasn't just a collection of memos or internal messages. It was, according to the lead forensic analyst, a complete and meticulous blueprint of deception, and at the heart of it were two contracts. Both documents, heavily redacted in public releases but preserved in full in legal custody, are alleged to be binding surrogate agreements naming Meghan Markle as the intended parent for two births, one in 2019 and another in 2021. These documents, provided to federal authorities by the whistleblower and authenticated through independent digital forensic processes, represent the cornerstone of the identity fraud case now forming against the Duchess of Sussex. They contain not only specific surrogate clauses, payment arrangements, and legal stipulations, but also timelines and coordination efforts meant to coincide precisely with Meghan's public pregnancy announcements. The contracts, each exceeding 30 pages in length, detail terms that suggest full concealment was not an afterthought, but an integral feature of the agreement. In both instances, the gestational carrier, the legal term for surrogate, agreed to a complete media blackout, lifetime non-disclosure, and in one version, a clause that explicitly reads, "Carrier agrees not to reveal the existence of this arrangement to any party, including extended family, unless directed to do so in writing by the intended parent." A clause like that, legal experts argue, is rare and aggressive. What makes these contracts particularly damning is their specificity. They list precise conception windows, travel arrangements to private birthing centers, and escrow accounts established in Delaware and the British Virgin Islands. Each contract contains a section titled Public Narrative Parameters, outlining the timeline and external story to be upheld. In short, the documents do not merely secure custody of the child, they script the public lie. One section of the 2019 contract includes the directive: the intended mother shall appear in public with visible signs of pregnancy beginning not later than week 20 to preserve consistency with projected due date. This section is followed by stipulations regarding clothing accommodations, photographer coordination, and travel exceptions for optics-related concerns. According to the investigators, this phrase, optics-related concerns, was not standard legal language. It was a media management term that had found its way into a surrogacy agreement. It suggests that the contract was written not just to protect privacy, but to construct an image of natural motherhood that never actually occurred. The financial disclosures embedded in these documents paint an even more complex picture. The first surrogate was allegedly paid a total of $480,000, split into 7 deposits over 15 months. Payments were routed through a U.S. law firm acting as a holding intermediary and listed as consulting fees. The second surrogate received a larger sum, approximately $600,000, but her payments were more aggressively protected. According to one ledger, she was issued a payment through a wellness nonprofit registered in Nevada, then routed through a crypto conversion before being liquidated into cash. Legal teams analyzing the contracts say this layering is a clear indication of intent to obscure. It wasn't simply about protecting the surrogate's identity, it was about insulating Meghan and her representatives from a traceable paper trail. Every legal safeguard was designed to eliminate the possibility of discovery, even years later. The contracts also make repeated mention of narrative conflict avoidance. This term, investigators explain, is used to refer to efforts that ensure all parties adhere to the same external story. In Meghan's case, this meant aligning the surrogate's birthing date with her own public appearance schedule. The contract includes a section for event coordination, which references media appearances, public outings, and the handling of security teams during late-stage pregnancy simulation. But beyond the text, it was the accompanying metadata that sealed the contract's authenticity. Each file carried a chain of revisions tracked through cloud-based collaboration tools. Embedded in the history were timestamps, edit logs, and email addresses tied directly to Meghan's legal team and private PR consultants. One revision comment, left by a legal associate and timestamped 3 days before the announcement of Meghan's first pregnancy, reads, "Ensure M signs the amended final draft before Monday's call. We need this locked before she steps out." For a legal team to be working in tandem with a media strategy this tightly choreographed suggests that the surrogacy wasn't just a private matter, but a deception managed at a professional level. Even more troubling were the companion documents, notarized agreements that included waivers for medical privacy, letters from the birthing center confirming surrogate check-ins, and post-delivery custody transfers signed within 30 minutes of birth. These aren't simply forms used in any surrogacy. These are forms that secure silence and construct illusion. In one of the documents, the surrogate agrees to immediately transfer physical custody upon physician clearance and to withdraw from the facility prior to the press announcement of birth. The wording is legal, but the intent is clear: remove the real mother before the world sees the face of the lie. Of course, Meghan's defenders argue that surrogacy is not a crime, and that much is true. But the issue here is not surrogacy itself, it's concealment, misrepresentation, and the legal manipulation of identity documents filed under false pretense. Meghan did not disclose surrogacy to royal advisors, government agencies, or the public. She presented both pregnancies as biological. She signed and submitted birth certificates that list her as the mother who gave birth. Those documents, if based on fabrication, cross the threshold from secrecy into felony. U.S. law permits intended parents to be listed on birth certificates in surrogacy cases, but it requires legal filings acknowledging the surrogate's role. Those filings must be approved by a judge, and the court must be made aware of the biological reality. No such filings have surfaced in this case. According to court records reviewed by journalists, both Archie and Lilibet's births were filed under standard documentation with no mention of surrogacy. That, legal analysts say, is what elevates this from a matter of privacy to a matter of criminal fraud. Beyond the courtroom, the moral questions are equally disturbing. Why would Meghan, someone who speaks so openly about empowerment and authenticity, go to such lengths to construct a biological lie? Why not simply disclose the use of surrogacy and reshape the narrative into one of medical struggle or personal choice? One possible explanation, posited by a royal historian interviewed for this documentary, is access. The use of surrogacy would have complicated both children's claims to royal titles. British law, though evolving, remains ambiguous on whether children born through surrogacy are automatically granted hereditary status, especially without a clear biological link and judicial transparency. If Meghan feared that revelation might threaten the children's place in the line of succession, it's possible she believed concealment was the safer path. Another explanation is optics. Meghan's public image, at least early in her royal career, was built around resilience, motherhood, and natural grace. Surrogacy, especially if announced after the fact, could have been viewed as inconsistent with that image. Worse, it could have invited speculation about her health, her fertility, and her personal truth, territory she was determined to keep off limits. Whatever the motive, the contracts tell the real story. And it is a story of manipulation, meticulously written, legally enforced, and now exposed. In the next chapter, we will examine the recordings. The raw, Unscripted audio files where Meghan's own voice allegedly confirms the planning, the fear, and the fallout she expected if the secret ever got out. Because documents can be denied, contracts can be called forgeries. But her voice, may be harder to escape. For months, the case against Meghan Markle relied primarily on paper, contracts, payment records, and internal emails. These pieces were damning, yes, but open to dismissal by clever legal teams. They could be called doctored, misinterpreted, taken out of context. That changed the moment investigators played the first audio file. Because a typed contract may be argued in court, but a voice? A voice speaking in real time, privately, casually, without expectation of exposure, that carries a weight the written word cannot match. And it was Meghan's voice. 5 audio recordings were delivered to U.S. investigators in late 2023. According to the whistleblower, these files were saved by accident to an unsecured cloud drive during Meghan's relocation from the UK to Canada. The recordings appear to have been made during internal planning calls, some with legal consultants, others with logistical aides. All 5 were verified by audio forensics teams and voiceprint analysts. And all 5 contain content that, when combined with the other evidence, leave little doubt that Meghan Markle knew exactly what she was doing. The first file, timestamped April 14, 2018, begins mid-sentence. Meghan's voice is calm, direct. I just want to be clear, we're not changing the date. She's carrying through July, and the due date will be announced as May. I don't want any questions about that. We've aligned it with the garden shoot, and the security team already knows the press timeline. The she referred to, investigators believe, is the surrogate hired for Meghan's first child. What's striking in this clip is not just the deception, it's the strategy. There is no panic in her tone, no hesitation, just coordination, as though this were another media rollout. In another file, dated February 2019, Meghan is heard discussing the process for obtaining a birth certificate. I don't want it filed through LA, use Santa Barbara. And please tell Jeremy to ensure it's logged under personal delivery. We'll sign it as soon as the notary confirms, but the courier can't use the palace address this time. It has to be direct to the private PO. Legal experts who reviewed this transcript described the effort to control jurisdiction and delivery method as a red flag. Meghan isn't just discussing legal documentation. She's manipulating filing channels to ensure no verification trail leads to a hospital or attending physician. Birth certificate fraud, when committed with intent to misrepresent a biological event, constitutes a federal offense in both the US and UK. The third audio file is shorter, but emotionally charged. It's not like I don't care, Meghan says, her voice cracking. I just don't trust the system to handle this kindly. They'll turn it into a circus. I'll be accused of being weak, or worse, incapable. This is my body they're judging. My motherhood. And I refuse to give them that satisfaction. This recording complicates the narrative. It doesn't clear her, but it adds a layer of personal anguish. If these tapes confirm a calculated deception, they also expose a fear of judgment, of image collapse, of public ridicule. Meghan's words suggest the concealment wasn't purely cynical. It was emotional, defensive, strategic, yes, but also rooted in trauma. However, intent doesn't erase crime. And the fourth recording, by far the most chilling, leaves little room for interpretation. Even if someone finds out, Meghan says, they won't come after me. The institution will never allow that. They'll protect the crown before they admit it happened. That's the safety in all of this. They'll fold before they fight. It's a statement that investigators interpreted as both arrogant and revealing. In it, Meghan expresses complete confidence that even if exposed, she'll be shielded, not by innocence, but by the monarchy's fear of scandal. That assumption, according to legal sources, is precisely why she is now being charged. Because the crown didn't fold. It stayed silent, but the law moved forward. The final recording is not a meeting. It's a voice memo. Make sure the photos go out next Tuesday. The ones with the coat and the bump. I don't care if it's 85 degrees. Just do it. I want the hair loose. Minimal makeup. Natural. That's the image. A mother. A real one. No more studio shots. That memo, investigators believe, was intended for her PR consultant. It corresponds with a widely publicized photo of Meghan walking in a California park, visibly pregnant in attire that drew media praise for its authenticity. But now, with this audio clip in hand, the photo reads differently. It wasn't a candid moment, it was a scene. a projection, a part of the illusion. The power of these recordings lies not only in their content, but in their casualness. Meghan doesn't speak like someone confessing a crime. She speaks like someone managing a brand. Her tone is measured. Her instructions are clear. There are no signs of coercion or confusion. Every phrase points toward one inescapable conclusion. She believed the narrative was hers to control, and that motherhood, even fabricated, could be manufactured for public consumption. The release of these recordings to law enforcement triggered the next phase of the investigation. Federal agents began cross-referencing the audio content with documented events. In nearly every instance, the timelines aligned. The garden shoot mentioned in the first file took place within the projected due date. The Santa Barbara filing was traced to a notary who later declined interviews. The Tuesday photo drop happened exactly as planned. Still, Meghan's legal team responded swiftly. In a leaked memo, they argued the audio files were private property, recorded without consent, and therefore inadmissible. But U.S. law on voice recordings varies by state, and the jurisdictions in which these recordings were captured, California and New York, include exceptions for evidence obtained in matters of public interest or criminal exposure. The courts have yet to rule on admissibility, but prosecutors remain confident. If allowed, these files will likely serve as the prosecution's opening argument. They do not just show knowledge, they show intent. And in the eyes of the law, intent to deceive the government using forged or falsified documentation is a prosecutable offense. For royal observers, the recordings serve a dual purpose. They humanize Meghan, while simultaneously destroying the credibility of her public image. Her defenders have always said she is strong, independent, calculated under pressure. These recordings confirm that, but they also suggest she used those same qualities to deceive, to script the most intimate aspects of human life, conception, birth, motherhood, and sell them as truth. The public reaction to the recordings, once they leaked, was immediate and explosive. Social media platforms exploded with outrage, analysis, and bitter divides. Hashtags like #VoiceOfDeceit and #Meghan'sTruth trended for 48 hours. Some called for empathy, citing Meghan's traumatic experience with royal life. Others demanded charges, arguing that no amount of anxiety or pressure justifies criminal deception. Media networks scrambled to respond. While mainstream outlets offered cautious coverage, independent broadcasters and digital journalists released detailed breakdowns of the recordings. Audio engineers confirmed the files had not been tampered with. Analysts dissected the language, the pacing, the inflection. Every word was weaponized. Every pause, parsed. Yet amid the chaos, one question remained louder than the rest. If she truly believed she was protecting her family, why not simply tell the truth? Why create a lie so elaborate, so exposed to collapse, when transparency, however controversial, might have garnered sympathy? Some say it was about image. Others say it was about power. But perhaps it was about something simpler: fear. Fear of judgment. Fear of appearing less than royal. Fear of a world that has never treated her kindly, especially when she revealed her vulnerabilities. Whatever the reason, the recordings are now evidence. And in the courtroom, where empathy fades and facts take center stage, the voice of Meghan Markle may be the one thing she cannot control. In the next chapter, we will examine how these admissions collided with official birth records, and why the falsified documents could be the cornerstone of the most high-profile identity fraud case in modern royal history. The power of a birth certificate lies not in its paper or the ink used to sign it, but in what it affirms: identity, legitimacy, and lawful entry into the legal fabric of a nation. It's the most basic proof that a person exists, and that their arrival into the world happened in a specific place, under specific conditions, at a specific time. In Meghan Markle's case, those conditions, according to investigators, were manufactured. 2 birth certificates for 2 royal children now stand at the center of a potential criminal conspiracy. Investigators allege that both certificates, Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor and Lilibet Diana Mountbatten Windsor, contain false information, intentionally filed to conceal the use of surrogacy and misrepresent Meghan as the birth mother. If proven, this deception would constitute identity fraud, document falsification, and perjury in both the United Kingdom and the United States. The implications are not merely symbolic. These documents granted Archie and Lilibet official recognition under royal and legal systems, securing them a place in the line of succession dual citizenship status, and access to taxpayer-funded security and diplomatic protections. But what if those documents are wrong? Or worse, what if they were knowingly falsified? Let's start with Archie. His birth certificate, filed in May 2019, lists Meghan's name as Rachel Meghan Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Sussex, and states the place of birth as the Portland Hospital in London, a private medical facility known for treating high-profile clientele. At first glance, the document appears standard, but discrepancies began surfacing almost immediately after its public release. First, the attending physician listed on the certificate had no public record of association with Meghan. In contrast to previous royal births, where the delivery team was named and often honored with recognition, Archie's certificate omitted any reference to medical supervision. Second, no witnesses, standard practice in some royal documentation, were identified. Most alarmingly, the hospital did not confirm the delivery took place. They offered no public statement. No media were allowed to photograph staff or the facility that day. No CCTV footage, no ambulance logs, and no entry-exit timestamps were ever released. At the time, media curiosity was dismissed as intrusion. Meghan and Harry said they wanted privacy. But now, with the emergence of surrogate contracts and voice recordings, investigators are reviewing the certificate through an entirely different lens. In late 2023, a subpoena was issued to the Portland Hospital requesting all records related to Meghan's admission. The hospital replied that no admission under that name occurred on or near May 6, 2019. A second request, this time under legal authority, revealed that the hospital's internal patient tracking system had no entry matching either Meghan Markle or Rachel Meghan Mountbatten-Windsor for that week. That alone didn't prove fraud, but it invalidated the public narrative. Further review of royal household logs showed inconsistencies as well. Staff assigned to Meghan's personal detail were never dispatched to the Portland Hospital that day. Instead, their logs reflect a stay-at-home directive, with no medical transportation listed. Meghan, by all documented accounts, was not moved, seen, or monitored by medical professionals on the day she was allegedly in labor. This combination of silence, absence, and denial led legal experts to examine the birth certificate for perjury. Filing a public record that contains knowingly false statements constitutes a crime in the UK under the Forgery and Counterfeiting Act of 1981. If Meghan knowingly listed herself as the birth mother while having used a surrogate, and if that information was used to obtain citizenship status or financial support, it could elevate the charge to identity fraud, a much more serious offense. In the United States, where Lilibet's certificate was filed, the law is similarly strict. Born in June 2021, Lilibet Diana's birth certificate was registered in Santa Barbara County, California. It lists Meghan as the mother and Harry as the father, with a home address tied to their Montecito residence. The document omits medical personnel names and provides no institutional confirmation of birth location beyond the vague label home birth. Initially, the document raised few flags. California law allows for home births and provides flexibility in how they're documented. But what changed everything were the voice recordings, the surrogate contracts, and the timelines. Federal prosecutors alleged that Meghan never gave birth at home or anywhere else. Instead, the surrogate gave birth at a private birthing center in Arizona, registered under a false client name, where the baby was picked up by an intermediary agent employed by Meghan's legal team. The Arizona facility, once subpoenaed, produced documentation supporting this account. The gestational carrier signed release forms on June 3, 2021, 2 days before Lilibet's publicly announced birthday. This discrepancy is critical. It proves, according to U.S. legal authorities, that the Santa Barbara birth certificate was not just incorrect, it was fraudulent. Meghan filed it knowing she had not given birth and did so in order to secure U.S. citizenship, Social Security registration, and international diplomatic protections for the child, all under false pretenses. These actions meet the threshold for federal criminal charges in the U.S., specifically under 18 U.S. Code Section 1028, fraud and related activity in connection with identification documents. The charge includes any instance in which a person knowingly uses or attempts to use a false document to obtain benefits, status, or identity recognition. But legal consequences are only one dimension of this scandal. The deeper issue lies in the royal system's handling of these documents. According to internal reports leaked by palace aides, Meghan was never asked to produce formal proof of childbirth. No medical team was assigned. No verification was made by the royal household. All trust was placed in Meghan's personal declarations. At the time, the palace saw it as a gesture of modernity, of respect. In hindsight, critics say it was negligence. This lack of oversight is now under investigation by legal and constitutional scholars. Because if these birth certificates are ruled fraudulent, every honor or privilege granted to the children based on those filings becomes suspect. That includes Archie and Lilibet's inclusion in the line of succession. Their royal titles, their citizenship privileges, their security detail. Every decision made post-birth would have relied on these documents as foundational truth. And for the monarchy, a system rooted in hereditary legitimacy. This may be the most dangerous part. A single fraudulent birth record undermines not only the children's identities, but the legal and historical fabric of royal continuity. This is not a simple matter of parenting choices. It is, at its core, a question of constitutional integrity. Sources within Parliament have already begun preliminary discussions about the legal implications. If proven, and if no corrective steps are taken, the House of Windsor could find itself embroiled in a generational scandal that affects not just Meghan and Harry, but the monarchy's future for decades. Meanwhile, Meghan's legal team has responded only once, issuing a vague statement denying all accusations of impropriety and insisting that personal medical matters remain private. No explanation has been offered for the discrepancies. No legal filings have been updated. The silence is becoming louder. In courtrooms, documents will be cross-examined, signatures challenged, and voice recordings debated. But for the general public, one truth already feels inescapable. The story they were sold, the fairy tale of modern royal motherhood, may have been a fabrication constructed on forged records and strategic lies. This is no longer about sympathy or scandal. It is about the legal architecture of truth. Because birth certificates don't just name children, they confirm reality. In the next chapter, we examine the actual moment of reckoning, Meghan's legal detainment, the charges read to her, and the first response from the institution she once called home. For months, the evidence had been quietly mounting: documents, voice recordings, financial ledgers, birth certificate inconsistencies. Behind closed doors, the Department of Justice had built its case with surgical precision. Federal investigators knew that once word got out, the public backlash, media firestorm, and international political consequences would be immediate and possibly irreversible. That's why they planned the arrest with one directive: speed, silence, and security. The warrant was approved on a Tuesday morning in Washington, D.C. It came with a sealed indictment covering 3 primary charges: identity fraud, falsification of government records, and conspiracy to defraud federal and state institutions. The order was signed by a U.S. magistrate judge under seal to prevent leaks and executed under the authority of Homeland Security in the FBI's Criminal Division. This was no ordinary arrest. It was prepped with full-scale strategic logistics, diplomatic protocol consideration, and security contingency mapping. Meghan Markle, at the time, was reportedly at her Montecito estate with her legal counsel present for unrelated civil matters. According to a source close to the investigation, federal officers arrived at the residence around 6:15 a.m. local time. The property, shielded from street access by tall gates and dense hedges, was entered quietly but firmly. There were no helicopters, no visible vans, just 3 unmarked vehicles, coordinated through the rear service entrance to prevent press interference. Inside, Meghan was notified of the arrest warrant. Her reaction, as described by an anonymous agent present, was calm, shock-layered, under control. She didn't argue. She didn't shout. But her expression changed instantly. She knew, the source said. Harry, reportedly in a separate part of the residence at the time, was made aware within minutes. He attempted to intervene on her behalf, but was told he was not under investigation and therefore had no standing to interfere. Officers explained the charges, read her the Miranda warning, and escorted her into the vehicle without cuffs, out of respect for her status and to avoid unnecessary escalation. From there, Meghan was transported to a private federal intake facility outside Santa Barbara. Not a public jail, but a secure processing center used for high-profile or diplomatically sensitive cases. She was booked, fingerprinted, and briefly questioned in the presence of her legal team. Her attorney, according to the federal press liaison, was already awaiting her arrival. The arrest was not announced publicly for several hours. federal agencies coordinated the release of a joint statement that was both deliberate and limited. At 6:15 a.m. Pacific Standard Time today, federal authorities executed a sealed arrest warrant in Santa Barbara County related to an ongoing investigation into identity documentation fraud and related offenses. The individual in custody is cooperating with authorities. Due to the sensitive nature of the case, no further comment will be provided at this time. That statement sent shockwaves through every major newsroom across the U.S. and the U.K. Though the identity of the arrested individual was not officially named, leaks began within 30 minutes. Multiple media sources independently confirmed that Meghan Markle had been taken into custody. By 10 a.m. Pacific Time, her name trended across all major platforms. CNN, Sky News, and BBC went live within the hour. Digital media exploded. Speculation soared. Was it political retaliation? A setup? A miscarriage of justice? But slowly, as legal filings were unsealed, the framework of the charges became impossible to dispute. The three core allegations were as follows. Identity fraud. Prosecutors claim that Meghan knowingly submitted false documentation during the filing of her children's birth certificates, falsely claiming to have personally given birth to both children. These actions, if proven, violate both U.S. and international statutes regarding lawful identity representation. False documentation. This charge is linked specifically to the falsified records submitted to Santa Barbara County and, allegedly, to British authorities through royal channels. It includes knowingly submitting perjured information on legal documents used to obtain citizenship status, titles, and government benefits. Conspiracy to defraud. Prosecutors argue that Meghan's actions were not isolated, but part of a coordinated effort involving legal representatives, financial intermediaries, and media handlers, designed to present a false public narrative for personal, financial, and reputational gain. The case is complicated further by the involvement of multiple jurisdictions. While the U.S. is leading the prosecution, UK authorities have reportedly submitted formal requests to review Meghan's documentation filed with the General Register Office, which oversees births and other civil status registrations in England and Wales. A British parliamentary spokesperson later confirmed that relevant parties are reviewing whether additional investigations are warranted under British law. The diplomatic stakes are enormous. Though no longer a working royal, Meghan is married to the son of the current monarch. She holds dual citizenship and lives in a country with close legal and intelligence partnerships with the UK. The arrest of such a figure doesn't only send legal shockwaves. It reverberates through the very core of political and media alliances. Some analysts argue this arrest couldn't have come at a worse time for the monarchy. With King Charles already managing internal royal family unrest, Prince Andrew's scandals still lingering, and growing public cynicism around the monarchy's relevance, this development could reawaken dormant Republican sentiment. Others suggest it could vindicate the monarchy, proof that even those connected to royalty are not above the law. As for Meghan, she was released the following day on a conditional bond. Her passport was surrendered, and she was required to wear an electronic monitoring bracelet pending her first court appearance. Terms of her release also include a ban on international travel and a restriction on public statements related to the case. Her legal team has not issued a full denial, opting instead for procedural rebuttals, claiming the arrest was premature, politically motivated, and based on flawed interpretations of privately executed parental agreements. But prosecutors appear unfazed. According to a source inside the district attorney's office, the case file includes over 900 pages of documentation and a digital evidence bank consisting of at least 38 audio recordings, metadata logs, and encrypted message chains. The court has set the preliminary hearing date for 60 days post-arrest. Legal analysts believe the trial will center not only on whether Meghan used a surrogate, but whether she lied in any legally binding manner during or after that process. It will also examine the involvement of any third parties, attorneys, assistants, or medical professionals who helped facilitate the false filings or conceal the truth. The arrest has also prompted unexpected ripple effects. An internal review has reportedly begun at the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, examining whether Meghan's children's citizenship status was obtained through false representation. While unlikely to result in revocation, the inquiry is viewed as a necessary formality. Additionally, members of the California State Medical Board are now being asked to determine whether any medical professionals signed off on fictitious documents related to Lilibet's birth. Meanwhile, Meghan has not been seen in public since the day of her release. The Montecito property remains locked down. No media appearances. No social media posts. No charitable engagements. A source close to the couple described the atmosphere inside the residence as quiet, tense, and fragile. Harry, who has reportedly flown to the UK for private consultations with royal advisors, has not commented publicly. It remains unclear if he was aware of the full extent of the alleged falsifications, or if he too will be summoned to testify. The public response remains deeply divided. Supporters argue that Meghan is being unfairly targeted, that the system is punishing her for defying tradition, for refusing to conform. Critics argue the opposite, that she leveraged public sympathy to build a false narrative, one that manipulated institutions and violated public trust. Either way, one thing is clear: this arrest is no longer just about Meghan. It's about truth, about systems of accountability, about the intersection of image and identity, fame and fraud. In the next chapter, we will peel back the layers of Meghan's public image, the humanitarian, the modern mother, the polished duchess, and contrast it against the revelations now in front of a court. Because when the courtroom doors finally open, it won't just be Meghan Markle on trial. It will be the story she sold to the world. Before the allegations, before the recordings, before the federal charges and courtroom speculations, there was only the image, a story constructed not by tabloids or royal courtiers, but by Meghan Markle herself. It was a story of resilience, grace, modernity, and reinvention. She was not just an actress who married a prince. She was a woman of the world, a humanitarian, a mother, a survivor, a voice for change. That's what she wanted the world to believe. And for a time, it worked. Meghan's entrance into the royal family was unlike anything the British public had seen in generations. She wasn't born into aristocracy. She didn't attend finishing school or descend from a long line of British nobility. She was American, biracial, divorced, an actress from television, not theater. Everything about her challenged the monarchy's stifled reputation. She was different, and that difference became her brand. From the moment her relationship with Prince Harry became public, the narrative was tightly managed. Photos of her feeding the homeless in Canada, carefully curated Instagram posts from her now-defunct lifestyle blog, The Tig, showcasing yoga, clean eating, and female empowerment. Her first public appearances with Harry were low-key, intimate, and surrounded by positive press. She wasn't just dating royalty, she was teaching it how to evolve. Then came the engagement interview, a sit-down so carefully choreographed it could have been mistaken for a scripted promo. She spoke about being in love, about meeting the Queen, about baking chicken the night Harry proposed. The nation swooned. Oprah praised her poise. Glamour named her a style icon. And media outlets ran endless comparisons between Meghan and Princess Diana, painting her as the new people's duchess. But behind that polished image, investigators now argue, a very different operation was unfolding. Meghan, while speaking of transparency and authenticity, was allegedly engaged in an elaborate strategy to conceal her use of surrogates. And the fallout from this duality is now at the heart of both legal proceedings and public disillusionment. Because this scandal is not simply about law, it's about the erosion of trust. At the center of this contradiction is motherhood. From the beginning, Meghan made her identity as a mother central to her public appeal. She cradled her baby bump during public appearances with theatrical tenderness. She made unannounced visits to women's shelters, connecting with mothers and children, always photographed in soft, maternal tones. Her interviews were filled with reflections on the sacredness of family, the transformation of parenthood, the emotional gravity of giving birth. "I feel the kicks," she told a reporter in 2019, while smiling and resting her hand on her stomach. "Every time, it's like a reminder that I'm part of something bigger." It was a quote that made headlines. It was also, prosecutors now argue, part of a constructed illusion. The birth of Archie was presented with great fanfare. Though Meghan avoided the traditional hospital steps photo op, the palace released carefully staged images of the couple introducing the newborn to the Queen and Prince Philip. Meghan wore white, radiated calm, and spoke of the miracle of life. But unlike Kate Middleton, who stood outside the Lindo wing holding her newborn within hours of birth, tired, vulnerable, real, Meghan never appeared postpartum. Her waistline was flat, her movements graceful, her complexion glowing. Critics called it unrealistic. Supporters called it progressive. Now, investigators are calling it deceptive. Because, they argue, those images were staged to reinforce a fiction. In the wake of the arrest, federal filings allege that the photos were timed not around birth, but around custody transfers from the surrogate. That Meghan's appearance wasn't miraculous recovery, but absence of childbirth altogether. If these claims are true, then the public was not merely misled, they were manipulated. Even more than her pregnancy with Archie, it was Meghan's narrative surrounding Lilibet that solidified her image as a maternal icon. In early 2021, she appeared in virtual conferences discussing parenting during the pandemic. She spoke to girls' empowerment groups about the importance of maternal leadership. She and Harry launched family-oriented content through their Archwell Foundation. In a deeply emotional essay, Meghan wrote about her experience with a prior miscarriage, describing the pain, the silence, the stigma. It was raw. It was moving. It was also, according to legal experts, part of a deliberate media strategy. At the time of Lilibet's birth, Meghan again declined hospital confirmation, released no medical details, and opted for a home birth narrative. Only one photo was released, a black and white image of Meghan and Harry smiling under a tree, baby cradled in their arms, Archie dancing nearby. It was hailed as organic, artistic, peaceful. Now, with audio evidence and surrogate contracts surfacing, that image is being reinterpreted, not as a slice of family joy, but as a veil for procedural misrepresentation. The gap between Meghan's public persona and her private strategy has become too wide to reconcile. At its core, this case is about that gap. Meghan Markle did not just say she gave birth, she built an empire of sympathy, relevance, and brand power around that belief. She wrote books centered on motherhood. She delivered speeches about parenting. She accepted awards and grants tied to maternal advocacy. Every one of those choices now exists under the shadow of alleged fabrication. Critics argue that Meghan leveraged the cultural hunger for maternal symbolism. That in a world yearning for progressive role models, she positioned herself perfectly vulnerable, yet powerful, modern, yet nurturing, royal, yet relatable. Her public tears, her softly spoken affirmations, her hand resting on her abdomen, these weren't just expressions of personal joy. They were tools. And tools, when wielded dishonestly, become weapons of manipulation. Supporters counter that Meghan was trapped, that the royal institution denied her the freedom to be transparent, that she feared judgment. That as a woman of color in a hostile environment, she protected her family the only way she could. But the evidence presented paints a different picture. It suggests not fear, but control. Meghan, according to internal files, directed press strategy personally. She reviewed press drafts, approved photographs, and coordinated social media timing down to the hour. She was not hiding, she was curating. And when that curation involved lying to governments, courts, and the public, it ceased to be branding. It became fraud. This dissonance is now playing out in public opinion. Surveys conducted after her arrest reveal a sharp decline in support. A majority of respondents in the UK and US say they feel betrayed. Even among former supporters, the sentiment has shifted from admiration to confusion. If she lied about something so fundamental, one former fan said, what else wasn't real? Journalists who once championed her voice now face backlash for failing to ask tougher questions. Media outlets scramble to retroactively investigate moments they previously accepted at face value. Influencers who built platforms defending Meghan now find themselves at odds with their audiences. The damage to her credibility may be irreversible. But perhaps the most tragic casualty is the idea of modern royalty itself. Meghan was supposed to represent a new future, less rigid, more inclusive, driven by compassion rather than convention. Her relationship with Harry symbolized hope, change, and escape from the suffocating traditions of the past. But if the allegations are true, then she didn't free the monarchy from its illusions, she added new ones. She didn't modernize royalty. She privatized it, repackaged it as content, sold it as lifestyle, managed it as brand equity. And now, with her empire under siege, her children's titles under scrutiny, and her legal freedom in question, the persona she crafted so carefully is dissolving under the weight of her own strategy. In the next chapter, we explore the reactions inside the royal household, how King Charles, Prince William, and palace officials responded to Meghan's arrest, and what conversations are happening behind palace doors as they face the threat of yet another royal reckoning. Because while Meghan's mask may have slipped, the institution that embraced her is not without responsibility. When the news broke, the royal family was silent. Not out of disbelief, but calculation. Silence is the oldest weapon in the House of Windsor's arsenal, used to shield scandal, to protect image, to wait out the storm. But this time, that silence couldn't contain the seismic impact. Meghan Markle, the Duchess who once symbolized a modern monarchy, had been arrested. Not for a media faux pas, not for royal protocol violations, but for criminal allegations involving identity fraud, falsified birth certificates, and conspiracy to defraud government institutions. For King Charles III, the timing could not have been worse. He had spent his first year as monarch attempting to rebuild the royal brand, reintroducing tradition with modern touches, elevating Camilla's position, and managing a carefully calibrated public image in a politically fractured Britain. But now, with Meghan's arrest, everything had changed. The question was no longer about modernizing the monarchy. It was about its survival. Inside the palace, emergency meetings were convened the morning the news became public. Charles was informed via a direct call from his private secretary, who had received a summary from diplomatic channels in Washington before the media announcement. According to palace insiders, the king's reaction was restrained but unmistakably grim. He was deeply disappointed, one senior courtier later said. Not just because of the scandal, but because of what it would do to the institution. The monarchy had gone out on a limb to support Meghan at the start. And now this. It was not lost on Charles that this arrest came after years of defending the couple's decision to step away from royal duties. He had kept communication lines open. He'd extended invitations. He even allowed Archie and Lilibet to be listed as prince and princess despite the family's departure. It was, many believed, an attempt at reconciliation. Now it seemed it had all been in vain. The queen consort, Camilla, was reportedly far less restrained. "I told you this would come back on us," she allegedly snapped during a private meeting with senior advisors. Her concerns had long been focused on the risks of embracing an outsider with a media-savvy background and American sensibilities. She never wanted this house to become a brand, said a source close to Camilla. And now we're dealing with the fallout of someone who treated it like one. But it was Prince William whose reaction carried the most emotional weight. The relationship between William and Meghan had always been tense, even before the so-called Megxit saga. William, who had grown up under the relentless gaze of the press and the weight of royal tradition, reportedly found Meghan's fast-paced manipulation of media narratives troubling from the beginning. He believed in controlled communication, press releases, vetted interviews, formal appearances. Meghan brought with her a Hollywood-style press machine, casual leaks, personal blogs, self-managed platforms. For William, it was chaos. When he learned of the arrest, he was reportedly mid-flight, returning from an engagement in Scotland. His private secretary broke the news in the air. According to a source on board, William didn't speak for several minutes. Then he asked only one question: what happens to the children? That question has become the royal household's central dilemma. If the allegations are true, and Meghan did falsify documents to obtain royal recognition for Archie and Lilibet, then the legitimacy of their titles, inheritance rights, and place in the line of succession could be in jeopardy. Under current British law, royal succession is determined not only by bloodline but by lawful recognition. Fraudulent documents, if confirmed, could force a constitutional review. Behind palace gates, legal advisors are already exploring contingencies. One scenario involves a quiet reclassification of Archie and Lilibet's titles, removing them from official public usage while maintaining family ties. Another proposes a parliamentary inquiry into the legitimacy of foreign-born royals who receive status through undocumented means. Both carry risks. Either could trigger public outcry, or worse, legal challenges from Meghan and Harry's legal team. Prince Harry, meanwhile, has remained almost entirely off the radar. Since Meghan's arrest, he has returned to the UK, where he has reportedly taken refuge in a private estate owned by a family ally. Publicly, he's issued no statements. Privately, according to a source familiar with internal discussions, he is in shock. The question many are now asking behind palace walls is one that cannot be ignored. Did Harry know? If he was aware of the surrogate arrangements and the fabricated documents, he could face legal exposure of his own. But if he was unaware, if Meghan carried out the deception without his full knowledge, then he is not just a royal caught in a scandal. He is a father facing the possibility that his entire family story was built on lies. Charles is said to be weighing these questions carefully. Though strained, his relationship with Harry has not been entirely severed. But any perception that he allowed the monarchy to be manipulated, knowingly or otherwise, could damage the king's credibility beyond repair. Prince William, on the other hand, has little interest in reconciliation. According to palace aides, his focus is on preserving the monarchy's future, particularly for his children. He believes the crown must come first, said a close confidant. Always. Even if it means cutting off those who threaten it. Publicly, the palace has said very little. A brief statement from Buckingham Palace, released the day after the arrest, read, "We are aware of the developments related to the Duchess of Sussex. As this is now a legal matter, it would be inappropriate to comment further. Behind the formality lies panic. Public relations advisors have warned that any appearance of coldness could provoke sympathy for Meghan. But any expression of support could be seen as institutional complicity. For now, they've chosen neutrality. But that cannot last. The press, of course, is relentless. Questions are mounting. Why did the palace not verify Meghan's pregnancies? Were senior officials aware of inconsistencies? Was there pressure to maintain the illusion for the sake of modern optics? And, perhaps most dangerously, did the royal family knowingly protect a fraud? Those questions have prompted whispers of a deeper crisis, a growing sense that the monarchy may need to reform how it vets new members, particularly those marrying in from outside aristocratic circles. A proposal is reportedly circulating within the Privy Council suggesting that future royal marriages undergo an independent background audit, particularly in cases where succession or taxpayer funding may be involved. It's a controversial idea. Critics say it reeks of elitism, but defenders argue that transparency is no longer optional. Not in the era of global scrutiny. Not when the royal family must justify its existence to a generation raised on truth over tradition. For the moment, the royals are regrouping. King Charles has canceled several minor engagements.